It's time that we do something with the binding on this guitar. I've got it laying here. I don't think I'm a procrastinator, but I gotta be honest and tell you that I feel like I've procrastinated a little bit on this. I don't know why exactly. I dread doing the binding every time. Most of the time it goes without any problem, but every once in a while you hit that snag and boy, it's just ugly when it happens. So it kind of bothers me every time I do the binding. You know, I don't have a quote-unquote professional setup for this. I just do it by hand. I use, this is actually the Stumac jig. I put their end back on here. I had modified it for my mandolins because when I do the mandolin peg heads, they're on a slant, and this doesn't cut it on a slant. It just doesn't. Because you just can't get close enough to your bit with this thing the way it works on a slant. It just doesn't work very well. But this is all straight-sided, so I put their end back on here. It's got a roller on it. Since I have to do a number of binding channels on this, I put this back on here because this is much easier to adjust. I've got it adjusted for the outside white binding right now, and so I guess there's no time like the present. Let's just get it done. I don't know. You know, like I say, it's just like the Rosa curse. There's just something that just hates me every time I do something like this. I mean, I hate to say that to you guys in public, but there's like a curse. It really is. Every single thing on this is tight. Everything. I can't find anything loose. I took it apart just now because I'm trying to find something loose. There's nothing loose at all. And there was nothing loose. And yet, the depth went down on me. And it went down fairly significantly. Not that I don't think we can recover, but it went down quite a bit. Why? I don't know. I can't figure it out. You know, I did a bunch of test pieces, no problem at all. You get to the guitar and then instantly something goes wrong. It just drives me crazy why I have this curse. There is some kind of a curse and I don't get it. I truly don't get it. It absolutely drives me crazy. And you think, well, what is he going on about? Well, let me show you. I mean, it's just aggravating. It probably won't show up very good there, but try to find where it's stepped down. But right here, it's stepped down. And this is deeper than this is. So, I don't know if you can see it, but right there, there's a step. And that step is down about, oh, it's not a 16th, it's probably a 32nd, but this is definitely, you know, deeper than this is. So now if you put your binding in there, you'd have a step up right there. So now I've got to reset this thing and pray that it doesn't go any deeper. I don't know how it did that. I can't figure it out. Every single thing is tight. I'm going to put the other collet on here. I tightened this with a pliers. I cannot get it loose by hand. It's that tight. So I don't think this slipped, but maybe it did. So I'm going to put the other collet on here that you tighten with a wrench. But I tightened this with a pliers. Like I said, I can't even get it loose. It didn't come loose. So I don't know what happened and why it went deeper. It's just the Rosa curse. That's all I can come up with. So my friends, I'm sorry to sound so negative, but I truly believe there's some sort of a curse on me sometimes. There's just like something has to go wrong. It's like, I don't care how perfect you do everything, how hard you try, something will go wrong just because it can, I guess. I don't know why. Oh, it's annoying. I have triple checked everything for tightness. I have tightened this thing down here so tight that I, feel like I could almost strip the threads. I mean, everything is tight. I've reset it, I've tested it, it's cutting perfect, and it's cutting at the slightly deeper depth. And to be honest, that's not that big a bad deal because I actually thought about cutting it a little bit deeper anyway. That gives me a little more round over on the armrest thing. So it's not that bad. It's just a little deeper than I had planned on going, but it's not that big a deal. So And it won't look weird or anything like that. It's not that much, but it just is annoying just to have stuff like that happen when you're so careful, because you know it can happen, you know, and it still happened. I don't know, can't explain it. Just the Rosa curse. That's all I can tell you. Well, as far as I could tell, that went okay. Boy, I tell you, I just don't know why I have to have so much trouble sometimes. It's just crazy. That looks good now. Everything looks fine. I think we recovered from the mild catastrophe, and I think it's going to be fine. And actually, I'm sort of kind of okay with the fact that it did that, because I really seriously thought about going a little deeper anyway, because that gives you more round over here. If you don't have enough down here, you can't round this over very much because you don't have any binding to round it to. So, that's okay. I'm fine with that. Before anything changes, I'm going to get the back routed. But first, I'm going to clean this up. Well, I find it hard to explain on this one too, but for some reason it didn't route it, I guess you'd say thick enough for the binding. The binding is thicker than the slot. So, I don't know, especially across the front here. Now, I know there's a little bit of an angle there, and that helped. That probably has something to do with pushing this thing in, which I don't. I probably should have just used my own design again rather than this thing, because once again, that angle, anytime you're on an angle with this thing, it doesn't work very well. I didn't think about the back being that much of an angle, so I wasn't really too concerned about it, but at least it didn't cut too much. It cut less than I needed, so we can go from there. I don't know if it shows up very well, but you can see I've routed another channel up in here. Now that's for the yellow and that extra herringbone binding that's going to go on top of here. And you can see that it's very shallow. It doesn't even go all the way through the top. But anyway, I think I've experimented and I believe I'm as close as I'll ever get, so it's time to get it cut. I did most of the experimenting, by the way, on a scrap piece. Then I put it on here and did a final little tiny adjustment to it. So I think we're in good shape. Overall, the binding channels look pretty good. There's going to be, quite a bit of hand touch up. I still have to work on this area here on the inside and a little bit on the outside both to finish that up. But that's going to take some special router setups and things. And unfortunately, I don't have time to do that right now because the road has been underwater for the last 2 days. The river came up, and so the road has washed out in a place or two due to the torrential rains we had just before the snow. It's like it doesn't ever end around here. And so now, guess who gets to go fix the road? So this has to set. Once again, I had to go to some extremes to make up something that was going to work here. I mean, I could have done it by hand. That's the way I did the last one. And it worked out fine. But I was thinking it would be nice if I had a better mechanical way, something that I could rely on the next time and have a more consistent way to do this. And I think I got it here. This has got rubber pads, rubber feet under it. I put this hole on the end so that I'd have room, to clamp it and have this thing spin back and forth, as you can see there. And it looks like it's going to work. It's just really hard. Honestly, it's hard to say if it's going to work. I just don't know, but I think it will. And it looks like it connects up to both of these notches. Actually, it's a little shy, but that's okay because I'm cutting the outer edge of it first, and so that should be right. At least I hope it is. I think I'm a little shallow in the middle here. I think I need to come this way just a hair, and I think I can do that with this. And now let me just double check to see how bad it is. You know, I'm going to go with that. I kind of think that's pretty good. Honestly, it's just hard to say. It's really hard to say. So I'm just going to go with that and see what happens. Here we go. I'd say that did a pretty nice job. I can take that out of there because, you know, I'm going to have to do it again, but that's okay. I wanted to just see where I'm at. If anything, I think it might need to be just a hair deeper, unfortunately. That's okay. I can make it deeper. And I'll put it back on there and see if that deepened it up just a tiny bit. That seems to be cutting at about the same depth as the other slot, so I think we're good there. Now I guess I got to go that way. You know, enough to more or less get this binding in here, and it's hard to tell about that, but only way I can do that is kind of by eye, really, right now anyway. I think that's going to be good, about there for a next pass. It may not be enough, but I think that'll be a good pass and see where we're at. You know, something got stuck on the end of the bit there, and you know, it just doesn't ever end. So I got to get that off the end of the bit so that I can continue to cut. It's stuck on there and it won't cut. There it is, it came off. Oh my goodness, why does it have to be so hard? Well, that's definitely doing a very nice job. It's getting very close, but it's got to go some more. That might be enough, but I got to test it here. No, I don't think so yet. It's still got to go a little bit more. Like I said, I'm sneaking up on it. But boy, that's going to be a nice tight fit, hopefully, if I can adjust it just the right amount this last time here. That was less than paper thickness that I took off of there that time. And that's okay. I want it to be tight. I think we might be there, but it's hard to tell without taking that thing off, and I hate to take it off because I don't want to move it. Just a hair more. If I could just do that same amount one more time, I think I have it. Ugh, it's so hard to do this. Well, that's really doing a nice job. It's even better than I was expecting. And I think I got it that time. Yep, I think I got it that time. That looks real good and snug and tight. That's looking pretty fine, pretty sweet. I think we're done there. But I do think I want to get it a hair deeper, and I may just do that by hand. Yeah, that's just a tiny bit deeper, and that's what I needed, I think. And I can scrape this down to it now, and I think we're good. All right, I think we're good there. Now, I'm almost tempted to just quit for the day. It's been a long day. Quit while I'm ahead, you know. Start on a good note tomorrow. You may be able to see the guitar is standing upright here. This is the tail end of the guitar, of course. And I've got it in my vise with some towels around it, just to, you know, hold it firm. It's not real tight. I need to do the layout for this, where I would call it the end pin inlay, I guess. You could just leave the seam there, and a lot of guitars, that's all they do. But I would like to put a decorative inlay here where we're going to put the end pin. And that disguises the seam. And it would be easier to put that in now before I put the binding on. I mean, it's easy to get ahead of yourself and just go ahead and put the binding on. Well, then that makes this more difficult. So this is just the time to do it. Let's get started. I doubt you can see this very good because I don't have the camera very high, but that's where the mount is, and I'm not about to change it just to do this work. Sorry. The end had a lot of glue squeeze out right here in this seam, so I cleaned that up a little bit, sanded it a little bit. I'm just going to draw the seam in here. These are some pins that Colin, I believe, sent to me from England. Pigment liner. I've never tried them, so I'm going to try one right now and see what it does. That's not too bad. And then I'm just arbitrarily picking numbers here. I would like for the bottom to be about 5/16 inch wide and the top to be, I don't know, maybe 7/16 inch wide. So that's just a guess. So I'm going to divide those numbers in two, set my calipers, and we'll do some marking here. Complicated guitar nerdy math here. We've got 5/16 of an inch is what I want it to be. That's what I want the inner inlay strip to be. That's not the final width. That's the inner inlay strip. So half of 5/16 equals 0.3125 of an inch. Half of that is 0.15625 inches. For my millimeter friends, that's 3.99 millimeters. So what I'm trying to do here is just mark that on either side of the center line. And that'll give me my 5/16 of an inch wide. And then the same thing up here, 7/16 up at this end would be 0.4375 thousandths of an inch. And half of that is 0.21875 thousandths. And then for my millimeter friends, that's 5.56 millimeters. I just pulled those numbers out of the air, you understand. You can make this any size you want to. I just want a slight taper to it. I'm just looking at it for symmetry there to see if I've got it pretty even. Looks pretty good, but I think I'm going to widen it just a fraction because it just to eye it looks like I've kind of marked it a little. This is where the imprecision comes in, is in the marking. That looks a little better. Okay, so we've got a slight taper there. It's very slight. Now that's going to be the red Paduke that goes in that spot. And then I've got two other pieces of wood that go on either side of that. And I'll have to just see how wide they are. There'll be one Paduke strip down the middle, as we said, and we've already talked about those dimensions. And then on either side, there's going to be a strip of yellow and then a strip of white. Strip of yellow, strip of white. And when you add the yellow and the white together, they're 85 thousandths of an inch, which is just a little over 2 millimeters. So we're going to add a couple of millimeters to each side here, so 85 thousandths to each side. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and make this Paduke strip. And I've already got the little thin strips made up. So when I get the Paduke strip made up, then I can glue it all together, and then we can lay it on here and just trace the final size. You know, a lot of people, when they see a piece of wood scrap like this, they would say, why don't you throw that stuff away? Why do you save all that? So this little piece of Paduke's been laying on the shelf there, and now it was lonely, and now I can cut out this center strip out of it, and the rest of it probably will go in the trash, but at least we got our use out of it. April Fools, you thought I was going to do it the old-fashioned way, didn't you? Well, to be truthful, I almost did. But I figure, why not? This little part would be perfectly made on the laser cutter. And so I'm going to lay it out here on the laser cutter. This is the Inkscape software. You can't see it probably, but I've already drawn a little tiny horizontal line there. This is the bottom line, which is 5/16 inch long, and I have it centered on the page. So I don't have to think about the center line. I just say center this on the page. So I don't know how well you can see that, but I've got it drawn there now. And I've got it drawn, the length of it's just a hair longer than what I need. I've got this oversized right now, and so basically I just need to, there's a few things you have to do technically here, and one of them is, first of all, I have to save it, so I'm going to save it. So now the page is the same size as that drawing, and I'll save it again. And exit out. I've got a piece of paper in there in the bed, and I'm just going to lightly score on the paper where this cutout is going to be, and that way I can position the wood right over that. Well, I don't know how much we got on camera on that, but I did a quick cut on the piece of paper to line up the piece of wood. I measured the cut on the paper also to make sure it was the right size, and now I'm telling it to cut it on the wood. I put the wood on there. Now my question is, did it cut all the way through, or should I cut it again? And my guess is I better cut it again. So without changing anything, I just decided to cut it again, and hopefully that way we'll know we're all the way through it. We're going to take a chance that it's all the way through. Let's pick this up. Yep, it looks like it went all the way through, but just barely. In fact, it looks like I may have to click it out of there a little bit. I'm glad I cut it twice. There you go, a perfect cutout. It should be really good. Hopefully you can see the piece that came out of the laser cutter. And if I lay it on my outline there, if anything, it's a hair smaller, which I kind of expected that, but that's not too bad. And that's plenty good for what I'm wanting to do here, what I'm wanting to accomplish. So now I need to glue the other strips onto this and let that set up. Talking about using all your pieces of wood, it looks like this is just long enough to get 2 pieces out of, and might as well do it that way. And we'll have a yellow piece on each side of the red that way. And then we need to cut out 2 white pieces. So let me just go ahead and get those cut. I think we're ready to go here. The trick is finding a way to clamp this. First I'm going to try a little mock-up here and see if it's going to work. I think it will, but it's better to try a mock-up first to see what your problems are before you put the glue on it. I believe that's perfect. Before I mess around with it anymore, I'm going to leave that alone. In fact, I'm going to go to lunch and come back and put that thing in the guitar. Take it out of the mold and see what we ended up with. It's a little bit damp still on the bottom side. Well, there's what the finished product looks like. You can see the red, yellow, and the white. And then when we lay it on here, it even looks nicer in my opinion. And now I'm just trying to center it up with the center line. I'm going to lightly score it with the X-Acto knife. And each time I cut it, I score it just a tiny bit deeper And without it moving, if that's possible, I want to score the other side. Now I should be able to run this down through there without the guides. Now that I've got it scored pretty well, I'm going to take just a freehand Dremel router and route this out. That's the best thing I've got, I think, is the... You could try to put straight edges on this, but basically I'll just route it out and try not to even touch these lines, and then we'll clean the rest of it out some other way. Well, instantly I just have too much stuff in my way, so I'm going to have to put the air assist on this. Well, that looks pretty darn clean to me. Let's see, I got right up to the line. I didn't really touch the line any more than I had to. And you can see that it goes in pretty nice, actually. Although, unfortunately, it's not going all the way. And that's okay. We'll work on that and improve the fit of that. And I'm just undercutting that little lip. You have to be able to see it, and it's a tiny lip. Let me tell you, it's tiny. It's just a few thousandths. This is one of the reasons you don't put it straight. You make it as a wedge, and then as you push it in there further and further, it gets tighter and tighter, and it's self-clamping. So there's all kinds of reasons to make it a wedge. Plus it actually looks more decorative too. While it looks better, it actually functions better. So, wow, just a little more now. That's getting pretty darn good. Tell you what I'm going to probably do is do some light sanding by hand. Wow, I can't get it back out now. I pushed it in there a little tight. There. That's pretty darn good. You'd be hard pressed to get one any better than that. So I'm not going to mess with that anymore. I'm just going to do some light hand sanding. This almost goes. It's just real close. I just think a little sanding on both edges, just by hand, will cause it to go the rest of the way, I think. Done just a little bit of sanding off camera. All I'm doing is just doing this, and it's just about ready to go. I think this might be enough right here to make it go. So let's see. Hopefully you can see how nice it fits. It's just a perfect fit. It's a little bit taller than the rest, but that's okay. I always like to have that. But it's only a few thousandths, like a paper thickness of a couple of sheets of paper at the most. One sheet probably. All right, so now I just need to mark it and cut it off. All right, so I'll take it out of there, cut those off, and then we'll glue her in place. Someone had recommended this saw as a better razor saw. I gotta be honest, I don't think too much of it right now. The teeth on it are gigantic. Here is what I use. You can't even see the teeth in this. Tiny, tiny, tiny. I mean, these teeth are tiny, yet it will cut you. So that's what I prefer. Those teeth there are gigantic. They would splinter this out. I guarantee you this Paduke is so brittle it would grab on those teeth and just split out. Where these teeth are so tiny, now it's a lot, it's not going to cut as good, this isn't, because they're so tiny, but it will cut it. Just takes a few extra passes. But you don't have to worry about it tearing anything out with this saw. And it is definitely a razor saw versus that thing with those giant teeth. You can see there it cuts it just as smooth as butter. Plus the kerf of this saw is so tiny it'll actually fit in the X-Acto knife kerf. That's what I call a razor saw. That cut that off just slick as snot on a doorknob. Got a little tiny piece right there that didn't cut, and I'll get rid of that with the razor blade. Now it should fit in there perfectly. I'm tempted to just, I don't know, it's such a tight fit, it might be hard to get Titebond in there, but I'm going to give it a shot. Alright, we'll let that rest. I think that's perfect. Thought I'd show you the difference in the kerf size on these saws. You can probably see the difference. Don't bother with the scratching. I wasn't very good with this saw and I scratched it a little bit. I even scratched it a little bit with this saw, so that's not a big deal. I started the kerfs without a line. But forget the scratching. Just look at the width of the kerf, how wide the slot is. This one cuts a much wider slot, probably almost twice as wide. If I set this one in its own kerf, you'll see that it actually sits up. I can just turn it loose and it won't fall over. In fact, I can shake it. If I set this one in the kerf made by the other saw, watch. Okay, it did stay up that time, but barely. It's amazing. It usually doesn't even stay up. It just flops, you can see. It's that much wider. This kerf here is very tight. It doesn't have hardly any wobble to it at all. So it's a much tighter kerf. And we can also demonstrate that in thickness of the blade here. This blade is 8.5 thousandths. This blade is 17 thousandths. So it's literally twice as thick as this. I mean, this is a nice saw, don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking the saw, but for this super detail work, this is what you need, not this. I keep thinking I'm ready to start the binding, but yet I find things that need to be done. And you can see there's all kinds of fuzzies around here, and those fuzzies have to be taken off before you can put the binding on, otherwise you're just going to have trouble. And I'm not going to film any more of it because it just has to be done through all over the top mainly. This spruce is the softwood that causes the fuzzies. I don't think there's many fuzzies on the rest of it. It's mostly just this top. As I often say, it's just not easy being me. As I started putting this around here and forcing it into place, I start noticing little minor gaps, you know, just little minor imperfections, and they're very small, but on the other hand they're there. And so I've got a little tiny square file, and I'm just going around and I'm touching this up like this and trying to smooth out wherever I can see a point that's sticking out or something that's maybe too flat or whatever, and just trying to round off and true it up. I think that's just going to have to do. We're just going to have to make it work. I'm going to start by putting this in place, putting it at the waist here, and making sure it kind of goes to all the points. And then I'm just going to put a piece of tape here to kind of keep it from flopping around while I'm working on this down here at this end. I'm going to let this run long, but I'm not going to glue the extra length. That's looking a little tighter. I always want it better though, you know. And now we've got to get that on there, plus these other two on there as well. One thing I'm running into is the white is a little bit taller than it probably needs to be. I'm going to maybe run the next piece of white through the thickness sander just a hair, just to knock it down a little bit, and I think it overall will just make it that much easier to work with. Trying to get all of this to fitting up. It looks like it's going to work really well. I will tell you that on my arthritic hands, this is really taking a toll at this point in my life. Never used to be a problem. Obviously, it is now. I'll have to take a break after this one if I can get through this one. I'm hoping I can. I think that's one of the reasons it just feels so much harder now than it used to. You get to that point in your life when these things, you know exactly how to do it, and it should be easy. Well, you know, I guess God has other plans. They always say, tell God your plans if you want to see him laugh. Well, now that we've got one side on, and keep in mind that was the easy side because it doesn't have the armrest. I'm going to see if I can saw this extra purfling and binding off right here. Try this new saw, see if it'll do a good job on this. It just seems to be a little rough to me. Get it down here where I can hold it better. Yeah, it did all right. It's a little bit crude, in my opinion, for this kind of work, but not too bad. So I needed to get that out of my way so I could come around here on this. So now I'll have to cut this binding all off straight, and maybe I should have done that ahead of time. I don't know, you know, it's 6 one, half dozen the other. It's hard to get it to line up exactly where you want it to, is the reason I decided to just cut it off. This has probably been drying long enough here that I can take the tape off on this end and start working on this. And I'll score it with an X-Acto knife first thing, I think. Well, that looks pretty good to me. So now we'll just have to, we'll start with that and move on. Maybe you can see how I've cut the joint right here and got it butted up. I'm still trying to get it to match up. It's, for some reason it's not airtight. I'm not quite sure why it's not airtight. It's like it just keeps not going there. And I keep trying to butt it up. There it is. There it's airtight. Now that's what I was going for. And that way it starts with a little like a diamond and then it goes both directions. And I'm only going to put this piece on this side right now just because I think I've got my work cut out for me on this side just with that by itself. The main reason is because right around here this is going to be quite a bit different in detailed work. So I think I'm just going to get the black on there first and then worry about the rest of it. Alright, I've got glue on this track already for this black herringbone binding, or herringbone purfling, I guess you'd really call it that. And I'm only going to put that purfling on first just because I think I've got my work cut out for me with the other two colors around this armrest, and I don't want to be fighting all three of them. And it's awfully tall, which I think is going to make it more difficult for me to line this up. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this down to a smaller size. I'll cut it off about right in here somewhere just to give myself a little bit of extra room. And that'll rip it down where it won't be so tall, getting in my way. Well, I think I've caught a little break here. I don't think this is going to be that hard to do. Basically, you just come back into this, and this just has to butt up to the end there, right at that little trough. I just cut a little tiny notch out right here. It's hard to see it, but there's just a little tiny notch about the thickness of this yellow binding, which is very thin, less than a millimeter thick. It's about 35 thousandths. 40 thousandths would be a millimeter, to give you some idea of a basis there of how thick it is. So I think I'm ready to just go ahead and glue this in place, this piece of yellow, and take it around here. And then basically I've got another shelf cut over here, but I see a little ripple right here first that I need to get rid of. So if I had a way of holding that good and tight right there, I could mark this and cut it off. I don't think this is terribly critical on the length, because I can always butt the other one up. It'll be sliding on top, and I can always butt it up to it. So I don't think that's a critical issue. I think I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off. All right, I think I've got it cut off to where it should fold in there. Actually, I cut it a little shorter than I thought I did. I usually am good about leaving things longer than they need to be. And that time, I cut it off about a 1/16 inch shorter than I intended, but it won't matter. Like I said, it really won't matter. Well, my solution, I think, will work. I'm just taking some small pieces of this binding and sticking them in here with tape. That'll help hold it over there, because the trough is too big that it would twist and let the binding come out at the bottom. That top edge yellow should line up all the way around. It's the next day. Everything turned out real nice. I'm pretty darn happy with it. It's in the ugly duckling stage in that it needs to be trimmed. It's dirty and all that, but it's going to be very nice. I can tell it went on really well. Now I'm matching up this big yellow piece here. I need to match up the little thin strip of yellow that goes in the inside there, and I believe I've got this one cut to fit just as tight as it can fit. And then the white would sandwich that, and then from the top it just looks like a continuous strip of yellow. That'll hold me for a minute. I'm going to get a damp cloth and clean up a little bit and then move on. I just went ahead and finished that off camera. It looks really, really nice to me. It's like it's going on every bit as good as I would hope it would go on. Well, while this was drying, I thought, you know, I would like to see if I could do something with a fretboard in that laser cutter. So I spent about 10 minutes here, and I drew up a fretboard, and just as a mock-up, I just put this many frets on it. Maybe you can see those frets through there. And they line up, like this one is the nut, and then the first fret, you know, right on down, and they line up exactly. Wow. I did it by measurement, and just wanted to see how accurate that thing is, and they're on the money. It's perfect. So that really shows there's a lot of potential here. The problem is I'm limited on length. That's about as long as I can do. So I'd have to find some way to slide this through and realign it. And I don't know if that's practical. I'll have to do some thinking on it and see if I can come up with a real good idea. And the one thing is I'd have to modify the laser cutter and cut a hole through it. That's one thing. And then I'd also have to then have a way to align it perfectly every time. I mean, to, really seriously within 1/1000th of an inch. I mean, to make it exactly right. Because if if you have to move it twice and you're off by 5/1000ths, by the time you get down here, you're off by 10/1000ths. Now, that may not be that big a deal either, but you're still off. So I want to get it as close and accurate as I can if I decide to do something with this. Well, friends, it's getting late in the afternoon, and I'm about wore out on working on this thing. I was going to try to put the binding on the back, but I've had a long day. I went out and cut firewood all morning and probably cut about 3 cords of firewood and hauled it back. I don't really stack it to measure it, but I would say it was pretty close to that. I would say it would fill my dump truck at least 3 times. I didn't haul it in my dump truck, but I would say it would fill my dump truck 3 times. And I figure the dump truck haul about a cord each time. It's got a 9-foot long bed, 8 feet wide, and it's about 20 inches high. Actually, you could get close to 2 cords on it, I guess. But I pack it pretty high when I haul it on there. Be that as it may, I just don't feel like starting the back on this because that's such a frustrating job, and I'd rather catch it fresh in the morning. I'm tempted to go ahead and trim the binding on the top. That's an easy job for me. I could see a lot of you thinking that, well, that's a lot more tedious. That doesn't bother me too much. It doesn't frustrate me, let's say it that way, like putting the binding on does. But something else just came in, and so I'm tempted to do this instead of work on the guitar. What is it? You've heard me complain in a previous video about the guide bearings on my bandsaw. Well, I ordered, new ones. Boy, these feel nice. I will say the machining on this is very nice. I got these from Carter, online from Carter. I will have to say that the machining, just looking at it, looks really nice. They did a nice job on that. That's the one that goes on the top, I can tell. This one would go down below. So we've got both of them there. And the machining really does look nice. Now my hope is that it'll bolt up to my machine without any big issues. I'm hoping that by having the bearing turned the proper direction, the way the blade goes down through, rather than going across the bearing, which is really stupid design, Grizzly. I don't know why you did that. But anyway, I'm hoping that that'll make these bearings last better because they just fill up. And of course these are sealed, so hopefully they'll be sealed better than the other bearings that I've been buying. These other parts came with it too. And they came with the adjustment wrenches, which is always nice. So maybe I'll make a separate video on installing that. In addition, might as well just show you what else I bought. I bought me a toy here. This is a mag fence for the bandsaw, sold by Carter as well. It's Carter Products, by the way, is what it's called. Carter Bandsaw Upgrades. It says Carter Products Bandsaw Upgrades. So I don't know about this. I just kind of bought this on a whim since I was on their website anyway, and I thought, well, that looks interesting. I'm going to try that. The fence I have on my bandsaw, I'm pretty happy with it overall. But I've got the old bandsaw, and the fence on it sucks. So I thought, if nothing else, I could use this fence on the old bandsaw. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then this has ability to on and off the magnets. I'll make a video on all this stuff and show you how it works down the road. Boy, it's really, really well made. I will say that. I was a little leery on ordering it because you never know what you're getting. And I'll say right now, Carter Products is well-made stuff. Whether or not it works or not, that's a different story, but it's for sure well-made. I can tell that just by looking. Well, it's still in the ugly duckling stage, but all the binding is on the body, finally. We got it all around that little armrest deal, but everything's sticking up proud, and proud means that it's standing above the top or the back. So I've got my little finger plane sharpened up, just as sharp as I can get it. And I'm going to go around and clean up the binding down to the level surface. This maple is curly maple, so it's sometimes you can cut one way and then you have to turn around and go the other way, so that the little, I don't know, notches or the little decoration in the binding, whatever you want to call it, it'll catch on your blade. I don't care how sharp your blade is. And so it's just better, you're better off to not fight it and just turn around and go the other way. Still good news, bad news thing when it comes to this binding. You know, it's good news that it's curly maple, and it's bad news that it's curly maple. The good news is it looks beautiful. The bad news is it's hard to carve. Now I'm going to start working on the armrest area. And I call it armrest. It's really just arm relief more than anything. It just is, your arm comes across there, so this is just rounded off to cut that sharp edge off. And you do it, you know, hopefully that it's also going to look nice. It, you know, I think it's going to look very nice because of the color and everything. I think I'm going to go to this fine rasp. The rasp is going to take a little longer, but it does a smoother job without any tear out. Yeah, it's starting to look real nice. Let you see up close to see what it looks like. And of course, again, it's still dark and stainy and all that. It's just got to be sanded off smooth. And this area right here, if anything, I got the inset here, this red inset, a little tiny bit low to the top. If I had it to do over again, I would have brought this up another 30 or so thousandths of an inch. It's still doable and it's still going to work just fine, but it would have just been a little easier on me and a little easier on my nerves had I got that up just a little higher. Feels real nice now. It's not sharp at all. I think I'm going to get some nice sandpaper now and start sanding this area. I do most of my sanding with 220 grit sandpaper. So I've got a lot of time left on sanding this, and I'm not going to show all the sanding because it's just doing the same thing over and over probably for several hours actually. And yes, I could probably use a orbital sander on this, but I don't like to. I like to use sanding blocks, and I can get the detail that I want without any chance of scratching it in a wrong direction or anything. Well, my friends, it's been another long day. You know, I've got all the binding finished, and I've done about 80% of the sanding on the body, and so we've still got some sanding to go. You can see how nice it's turning out, how the seams are all tight, everything looks good. I'm real happy with it overall. be really hard to beat it overall. Got, you know, that beautiful top is just going to make it sound wonderful. There's the back. Anyway, the binding is pretty much done. Here's what the binding looks like on the back. You can see the, you know, the different colors there. I think we've left the ugly duckling stage and we're now kind of at the adolescent swan stage. So it's on its way to being beautiful. It just isn't quite there yet. But that's where we're going to leave it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Tell your friends. Click that thumbs up. Thank you.